Can the Minnesota Vikings get back to the playoffs in 2024 after a 2-year roster transition? We're examining the state of the Vikings roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Joe, do you have any introductory things today?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Is it the Baltimore Ravens helmets?
No.
We could talk about purple teams.
Purple teams, yeah. I like the idea of the new alternate helmets. I just don't like the logo. Yeah, logo stinks. I did have something else though. Are we nervous? Are we nervous that Edmonton's going to come back? Connor McDavid's
probably. I mean, that's the Florida sports fan experience, right? The South Florida sports fan experience is the most heartbreaking way possible. Probably.
Well, they just got to win one of the next two, man.
Right?
One of the next two.
We'll see what they're going to play them all and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we don't play them all, Kyle Crabbs. Just get 6 in and be done. Get these Oilers the heck out of here. Last introductory thing that we got to get to.
No, I got some.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just realized I always do it.
Yeah.
Because you do the intro, and I figured I would give you the ball first today.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
No, you have.
Well, it's JJ McCarthy's first pitch.
We'll talk about JJ McCarthy's concerning first pitch when we talk about JJ McCarthy. I have found we love sports and football, and different cultures have different sports, but we love football and sports in general because it's like the common link. It's the bridge between different creeds and backgrounds and genders, right? Like everybody loves sports. I found the next one.
The next sport?
The next bridge.
Okay.
I live in a very diverse neighborhood, right? So if you triangulate my house, I have 3 different people from 3 different cultural backgrounds on either side of me, like behind me and on either side. I'm outside this morning because it's hot. We're watering the grass. I got the
I feel like you've been watering the grass a lot lately. This has been a big
thing. Because my grass is dying, and I'm out there at 5 a.m. and I'll be danged if the guy behind me and the people on either side of me aren't out there setting up their sprinklers all at the same time.
Oh, God. What a weird 5 a.m. moment.
Correct. But nobody wants to be the guy. Either everybody, once you hit a certain age group, I'm 35, so I guess I'm into the next demographic, right? It's like 35 and 24 to 35 and then 35 to 45 or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm into that bucket now. And I guess either everybody's like super passionate about like, I don't want my grass to die, or everybody has an ego and sees the other people setting up their sprinklers and says, I can't have the worst grass in the block. I got to get it together.
You can answer this for yourself. What's it for you?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So it was just like, it's funny because it is such like a diverse neighborhood, and it's like everybody's all out there at the same time. We're all just like, hey, doing the grass thing. Everybody's doing the grass. So that happened this morning. It was really funny.
Wow. Way to collaborate and care about the property values of your neighborhood.
I kind of want to get everybody together though and be like, hey, can we overlap our sprinklers where like you get this side of my house when you get this side of your house? And then like, I'll get the backyard and face it your way. So I get a little bit of your yard. And then the people on the other, like, you know what I mean? Like everybody uses a little bit less instead of having to set up a second sprinkler or move it around throughout the day. I think I just remembered, I think I left mine on still. So I can turn it off when we're done here.
Wow. Going to get a nice drenching there. Yeah.
It'll be nice and wet. So that's what I have. Not Minnesota Vikings, really.
Well, Minnesota Vikings fans, Skull, thank you for being here. It's your day. It's NFC North week, and we have gotten to the third place Minnesota Vikings. And as we've done for every team to this point, we're like kind of getting towards the end here. We've got like 2.5 divisions left to do. Kyle and I take every summer and we assess the NFL, we assess the rosters, and we study these teams. We watch film, we consider these depth charts, and we put every player in a bucket. And those buckets are roster cornerstone, quality starter, rookie, adequate starter, replacement level, quality depth, non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, or practice squad developmental player. And every bucket is weighted. It has a numeric value. It's weighted in terms of positional value. And so Kyle and I have done the work on the Minnesota Vikings. We're here today to show it to you. And as we get into this conversation, Kyle Crabbs, we'll start with the offensive side of the football. Your prevailing takeaway with this?
Pretty good situation for a young quarterback to step into, whether that's J.J. McCarthy and his awful first pitch, or it's Sam Darnold. And it seems like there's some momentum right now for Sam Darnold as far as kind of coming out of the mini camp phase of the offseason. There's still a lot of offseason that has to, be determined to ultimately determine who wins that job, lock, stock, and barrel. But the offensive line has, I think, good players in the right places with the tackle situation, and Garrett Bradbury's solidified himself as a reliable starter. You got a really good tight end, the infusion of Aaron Jones, one of the best wide receivers in the game, and Justin Jefferson, who you just paid, another young player in Jordan Addison. So that's for me. I look at the whole supporting cast, and that's not a surprise because we do that content every year, right? Where we look at the rookie quarterbacks and what they have around them and we grade it. But Minnesota, I think, is very well equipped to have some stability with the coaching staff and the scheme that's the same scheme year over year, and then talent that matches that. You feel good about what they have to offer J.J. McCarthy.
Well, and I would agree. I think this is a wonderful example of everything that I prefer in a young quarterback stepping into. You don't have a developing quarterback around developing weapons. You've got Justin freaking Jefferson, TJ Hockenson. We have those guys as cornerstones. He's got a cornerstone receiver and a cornerstone tight end with a quality starting running back in Aaron Jones. And then Jordan Addison, who was unbelievable as a rookie. And what's really impressive about Jordan Addison is how he was able to produce despite the quarterback situation where, of course, Kirk Cousins goes down. They play like 47 different quarterbacks. And then, of course, Justin Jefferson, not necessarily available for the entire season either. Jordan Addison still goes out there and is highly productive. And so I think this situation is awesome for J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold, if that happens for a while. And then, of course, the tackles, right? Like you mentioned, Darrisaw, O'Neal, that's as good as a tackle combination as you're going to see in the NFL. So I love so much of that infrastructure. If I were to point out maybe an area that I have a level of concern about this offense, it's probably the interior offensive line. Dalton Risner, I think his best football is kind of behind him. I think he's a serviceable answer for them. Ed Ingram, I appreciate the step that he took from year 1 to year 2. He's got to take another step in year 3 for him to be a guy that I look at as, okay, yeah, we're fine here with Ed Ingram. And I don't really love the depth, right? So it's not like you have a hedge. I mean, what is Dan Feeney? You're probably your best interior backup. Then it's like Blake Brendel, Tyrese Robinson. Like I feel like you need Risner and Ingram to be answers for you and for them to stay healthy, because I think offensive line depth in general, maybe you think Quessenberry and Feeney are okay as like your 6th and 7th offensive lineman. I don't want to get into that world. And I know that they kind of had to, especially with Quessenberry at times last year. How good is this interior offensive line going to be, and are you going to need the depth?
Yeah. I did quite the deep dive on Dalton Risner. He's been like a folk hero for Dolphins fans in the offseason the last 2 years of like, oh, we have our own offensive line issues. Sign him. I think he's a fine player. I don't think I look at him and feel as though he's a bona fide asset. I think he's somebody who you can keep your head above water with, but I don't love the fit within that scheme. And I think that's probably applicable for Ed Ingram too. As far as what Ingram was coming out of LSU, it kind of felt like they had a little bit of a vision for him with where they drafted him, and it just hasn't clicked all the way into place. The good news for Ingram is he's still kind of in that window where a lot of offensive linemen, when they come into the league, it takes a while to click, right?
Mm-hmm.
Risner's a little bit past that window, right? He played out his whole rookie contract, and this is his second 1-year deal after that. So I have a little bit more optimism for Ingram snapping into place a little bit more. But I do agree if I'm looking for a weakness, I would say depth at wide receiver and depth on the interior offensive line. At least you have Walter Rouse as a tackle that you've put into the mix there at tackle as well. And Questenberry can play all over the offensive line. And the tight end and running back depth, I think, is really good. It's just why on the perimeter in the skill group and then on the interior on the offensive line, I think is where my questions are for depth.
Would love to get a little bit more into wide receiver depth. And I want to ask you about Aaron Jones and your thoughts on his fit in this offense. So be sure to stick with us. Folks, the NFL schedule is out. So many high-profile games that you probably want to get to this season. Well, if you do, check out Game Time. Download the Game Time app. It's the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. I love the app. It's easy to navigate. They give you last-minute tickets. They give you flash deals. They give you a picture of your seat view so you know exactly what to expect when you get to the venue. But my favorite thing is the all-in prices. You know the price you're going to pay at the end of the transaction from the beginning. No surprise processing fees coming. They give you that full price from the outset. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I think calling out the receiver depth's a really good spot to continue this conversation. Obviously, Justin Jefferson missed a little time last year. They were able to lean on Jordan Addison and TJ Hockenson and KJ Osborne, who's no longer part of this mix. Yeah. I think there's the succession plan there appears to be Brandon Powell, who's been a serviceable return guy in the NFL. I know he got some opportunity to play a little receiver for them last year, but this is kind of a big opportunity for him, right? And I'm always a little leery of a guy that's this far into their career to like now all of a sudden maybe be a third receiver for a team. But I don't know who else it would be. Maybe Jalen Naylor. I think Trent Sherfield and Tristan Jackson are more like break glass in case of emergency type options. So I think Brandon Powell is an important piece of this offense.
Yeah, I agree. I guess if you're going to find the silver lining with the questions you have at wide receiver, we mentioned the tight end depth between Josh Oliver, Robert Tonyan, and obviously Hockenson. Johnny Munt has played some snaps, and I think you have a lot of guys that maybe not are centerpieces like Hockenson is, but you could take a lot of snaps with tight ends. I think you could play a lot of 12 and feel good about whoever that second guy is. And if you need to go super heavy in a specific game, I think you can do that too.
A couple things here. One thing that I've just kind of come to an epiphany on with the NFC North is that every team's paying a running back, right? They all are. Every single one of them. They're into running backs in the NFC North. Yeah. And of course, that includes the Vikings, who now have Aaron Jones taking over as the feature back. And this is interesting because 2 years ago, I was critical of Dalvin Cook. Last year, you could not be more critical of Alexander Mattison. So where are you at on Aaron Jones and kind of the direction of this run game?
I think the concern's just how much of a workload is Aaron Jones in his age 30 season going to take, right? I think he's an outstanding overall talent. I think he has the vision. I think he has the cut ability. I think he still has a little bit of pop to play in this system and cut off your blocks and make your reads appropriately and, you know, be able to stick your foot in the ground and get to a gap and process that all very quickly. And I love the fact that there's a passing game element, kind of gets you back into the kind of running back style that you had with Dalvin Cook before Dalvin Cook stopped being Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
But it's like, how much is in the tank for Aaron to be the featured player, or are you going to lean on these depth players? Are you going to lean on Ty Chandler to help soften that? And if you do that, I think you can put yourself in a position to get the best of Aaron Jones. But I think if you put too much on Aaron specifically, there's been some bumps and bruises and hardships from a volume perspective. The past couple of years, there's been 2 times, including in 2022, where he had almost 300 touches in the last 5 years. That number was 172 because he missed 6 games last year.
Yeah, but like going back to last year, the Packers almost rode Aaron Jones in the NFC Championship game. I mean, He ripped off like 5 consecutive 100-yard games. I remember watching this team late, and I'm like, oh my God, Aaron Jones is like,
but it's because they found a way to get him in the right shape at the right time of year to be able to do that. My worry is if you're gonna do what you did with Dalvin Cook with Aaron Jones 2 years ago, and just have him be a volume player who touches the ball a ton. Yeah, the stats might look okay at the end of the year, but like, is it really the best version of the player?
Yeah.
That's
where Chandler. I think Ty Chandler's going to be
good. Chandler looked good last year. He was the best back on that roster last year.
Oh, yeah. There's no question about that. And then we'll see with Nwengu. I mean, obviously the return game is where he is appealing, but there's a lot of love for Dwayne McBride as well as a young player. So that I think they need to get them all going to get the best version of Aaron Jones down the stretch. It feels like he's really highly motivated. I'm sure he is, man. You get a chance to like have the run that he did with the Packers, do what he did at the end of the season. They say, get out of here. We're paying Josh Jacobs instead. You go sign with the Vikings. That's a fun storyline to consider. And that's David Montgomery, right? Transitioning from the Bears to the Lions. I guess we just swap running backs.
Right. They'll stay in division too.
Right.
We get our first Aaron Jones revenge game week 4 in Green Bay. Kind of like that he goes to Lambeau first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but also it'd be kind of fun to see like late season snow game where,
Yeah, no, they won't do that.
No.
The only snow opportunity you have for Minnesota this year is at Seattle, week 16.
Yeah, it's probably
because
unlikely.
They're home for the last 6 games, and one of the 2 road games is at Detroit indoors.
It's another one of these teams that doesn't. Well, they go outside more than.
Do they?
They do. They go outside. They go to the Giants. They play in Green Bay.
I was going to say, well, they don't do it at home because they're indoors too.
To Jacksonville, to the Titans, to the Bears, to Seattle. So they get to play outside a little bit. All right, let's talk defense, Kyle.
Okay.
Brian Flores runs the most unique defensive of any team in the league, right? So there's always a different lens that you have to apply when you talk about Brian Flores, the personnel, and I know that you are well versed in the Brian Flores school. You lived it. You lived it. So I want to kind of give you the floor here and kind of get into your prevailing thought on this defense.
I think the biggest thing that they did was remake the edge room the way that they did, where you draft Dallas Turner, you sign Andrew Van Ginkel, you sign Jonathan Greenard. A little bit of a different skill set than what you had with Danielle Hunter. You get younger there. I think that helps. But the whole book on this defense, right, is we're going to get all these guys up on the line of scrimmage, and half the time we're going to bring everybody. And then the other half of the time, we're going to drop everybody, right? We'll rush 3. Having guys that can win when you rush 3 is huge. But having guys who can drop when you rush 3 is even more critical. So it's that versatility of guys who can play forwards and backwards. And I think that's where you really can weaponize the landmarks that the guys can reach underneath, because if you put everybody up on the line of scrimmage and you're charging guys with dropping out, and they're supposed to take away throwing windows and get into the hot lanes, and they're not athletic enough to really do that, you give up a lot of easy completions underneath. So you're prompting at the line of scrimmage, you're testing every team's ability to play hot and process and get a feel for what is their pressure answer when we play them. And if teams gouge you, you're in trouble if you don't have guys that can space the underneath portions of the field effectively. And that's where I look at Andrew Van Ginkel specifically. And he played with Flores in Miami. They drafted him in the 5th round in 2019. Brian Flores' first year as the head coach for the 3 years that he was there. And he developed into a good player. They kind of tried to make him a full-time player, and it didn't happen. He gets pushed with a different scheme into a full-time role with injuries this past year and kind of really captivated it and took. And I think his player development is as such. People forget he was a JUCO transfer who played 1 year at 2 years at Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So that addition to this scheme with how they try to play is the biggest boost I think they've made, is guys on the edge that can play forwards and backwards.
All right, plenty of more to get to with this Vikings defense, including some chatter on this interior defensive line. And again, I know that's a little bit different in the school of Brian Flores, so we'll get into that here on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us.
For the record, I do have big questions with the interior group.
Yeah, well, let's go there because I do as well. And I know that, again, it's a different style of defense, and so maybe we need to apply a different lens here. But, I mean, I see Harrison Phillips, and I see a bunch of nothing else, man. So what's the deal here? How does this work together in the Flores scheme?
Well, they like gap control guys, right? And I think you have that with Harrison Phillips. I think you can have that with Jaquel and Roy. I think you have a couple of penetration type bodies with James Lynch and Jonathan Bullard and Jerry Tillery, I guess to some degree is that. Jihad Ward from an inside-outside perspective, maybe that Emmanuel Agba-esh type player who can reduce inside at times and utilize length and have heavy hands. I think that's kind of the vision, is two different skill set types. And then they love to have a linebacker who triggers and gets downhill to fit the run, and they have that with Ivan Pace, who is a home run skill set fit to go along with that to help their run defense and be stiff up the middle, right? But I think that for me is, you just wish they had more complete skill sets. It feels like it's totally segmented where you have either all of one type or all of another type with your guys as compared to guys that can do a little bit of both. And I just got done heaping all the praise in the world for them getting edge guys that can go forwards and backwards. I don't think they have a lot of complementary all around skills on the interior. It's either all of one or all of another.
Yeah, I think teams are going to test the Vikings' run defense this year. I think that's going to be an emphasis of opponents. One thought that I had, as you mentioned, the structure of this Vikings defense under Flores, where they're going to really stress your ability to get into your hot reads. What's this division? It's young quarterbacks, man. I mean, we're talking, we got Caleb Williams is part of this group, Jordan Love. I know that Jared Goff is not a young quarterback, but as you start to see more and more young quarterbacks enter the NFC, the Flores matchups are going to be one to watch for sure.
Yeah.
Love the addition of Dallas Turner. I know you already talked about the edge stuff. I know they gave up a lot for him, and I think he can be an answer for them. But Greenard, Turner, Van Ginkel, yeah, that's strong. And I know that was completely overhauled. Like, not a single one of the players I just said played for this team last year. But to be able to transition away from Danielle Hunter and still have that to show for it is really strong for me. Secondary is interesting, Kyle. Shaq Griffin comes over. Bryon Murphy's still here. I thought they got some nice flashes from some younger players in Mekhi Blackman and Caleb Evans. Josh Metellus has become a thing in the slot, which really surprises me. Rock solid safety pair in Smith and Bynum. But kind of, I want to keep going back to you in this Flores background. Like, what do you like here about this group? What might be missing?
I like that they got a little bit of experienced physicality with Shaq Griffin to put into this room where we talked about last year at this time. It was, well, Bryon Murphy, is he better inside or outside? He can play sticky. He's got the foot speed to do it. And then it was a lot of inexperienced physical guys like a Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth. And the other guy was Mekhi Blackman, who it's like, well, he's going to get up on the line and play press. How effectively can he do that? Because he's not really a big guy. I think Shaq Griffin kind of allows you to play matchups a little bit more. Have Murphy shadow with a guy who's a twitched up guy if you want to. You could have Shaq Griffin be the guy who plays press on line scrimmage against a bigger guy if you want to. And I think the thing I like about Griffin, too, is his experience when you consider some of the stops and destinations where he's been good. zone coverage, playing from depth. So not just being up on the line of scrimmage, but if they're going to play him off, he's accustomed to, and he's been at his best at times with his eyes in the backfield and processing and making plays. And again, when you are manipulating calls at the line of scrimmage and manipulating protections and trying to facilitate teams you're dictating terms as far as like, we're not going to run our 7-step and 5-step drop game with all these guys walked up here. We're going to get the ball out of our hands quick. Guys who can see it and transition and attack and be good in that kind of role make a lot of sense, because you are either going to try to blanket them and play man, or you're going to play from depth with vision and attack and play downhill. And I think Shaq Griffin can do that at a pretty high level as well. So I think that is a complementary addition to a room that didn't have that element, in the same way that I think the edge group got a complementary element that it didn't have last year too.
I would like to ask you one more question.
Okay.
Josh Metellus. Candidly, I never saw this coming. I watched him at Michigan. I was not in love with what I saw. And then for 3 years in Minnesota, I mean, he didn't do anything. Then this past season, this guy became a big time playmaker. What about his skill set with Brian Flores do you think has like unlocked something that I personally never saw coming?
It's not really unheard of for a player who maybe didn't have hallmark traits to play safety, or a player that had hallmark traits to play corner. I think about Nick Needham, an undrafted free agent in Miami who clicked as a nickel player in the same scheme. And he's tough. He's a good tackler. He's dense, but he's not long, so he can't really play on the outside. You don't really like the athleticism to turn and run with guys. And it's more about football instincts, fitting the run, tackling, understanding your assignments, and how you fit within the run fit to trigger downhill. You could play up and be an attack player. I think that's where Metellus, who came into last year with less than 350 career snaps, right? Played over 1,000 snaps for the Vikings defense last year. That's a role that you saw emerge with an unheralded player previously with Brian Flores. So I'm not necessarily surprised that it clicked. If you would have looked at the depth chart last year and told me he would have been the one that would have clicked into place, he wouldn't have been the one that I picked. But it's just, there's a style of play, mentality, instinct overlap that I think there's a common theme kind of between how Needham clicked into place for Flores and how Metellus clicked into place for Flores.
See, you got it. It's a different lens. It's a different conversation. So thanks for allowing me to use this as my personal opportunity to learn more about Flores and how these players fit together. So
we do need to touch on a few players for consensus purposes. I know the most prominent one is Andrew Van Ginkel, who I was just very complimentary of. Yeah. But you said something earlier in the show that I think is kind of going to be the thing for them this year. And it's teams are going to test Minnesota's ability to defend the run. And I think for me, they had good run metrics last year. They were 4th in yards per carry. It's 3.8 yards per carry. But I look at the front with Harrison Phillips, okay, pretty good run. You feel like that's a pretty high floor run defender on the interior.
Right.
Tillery?
Nope.
Jonathan Bullard?
Nope.
Jaquelin Roy?
Nah, dude.
And that's my question with Andrew Van Ginkel too, is like as a stand-up or movable pass rusher who can play in space, can play on the second level. They played him at stack last year. Fangio played him at stack at times last year. He kind of started as the second nickel linebacker with Jerome Baker, and David Long eventually took that spot. But like, they had a lot of spots to move him. But if you're just going to play him on 1st and 10 or 3rd and 2, and put him over top of a tackle with a tight end to the strength side, and maybe you try to put him on the weak side and work around it that way. But then there's concessions that are made if you're going to have to play your front that way. The point of attack work's not really where he shines, and that's why he was a 5th round pick. Is he's not the biggest guy, and he's not super long, and he doesn't really have heavy hands. He's more of a first 3 steps, kind of stress you in your pass set, win with first step quickness, really small surface area to kind of duck your hands and turn the corner. He can beat you inside. He's got a nice spin move, but the run defense is kind of the question that I have there. And all of that together, for me, you can only get out of it so much just based on your structure of your front and say, we're going to flood all the gaps so you can't run the zone stuff because we're going to have an unblocked blocker on the backside and we're going to string you out and he's going to chase you down from the backside.
I think that's a good summary of Andrew Van Ginkel. And where we're different is I have him as a quality starter. You have him as a sufficient level starter.
Mm-hmm.
I think the pass rush, particularly in this style of defense, the effort that he plays with. I mean, he's got the long blonde hair and it's flowing all over the place. I know how I felt playing against Andrew Van Ginkel twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year for the last, 5 years. Even before he really started to put up numbers. Like I was always talking to you about him. I'm like, this guy is a problem. Like I am very happy that he's no longer on the Dolphins. Like I know that Wilkins is a real stud, but I thought of Van Ginkel kind of through a similar lens. Like these guys are like havoc wreakers. And I know that there's run defense issues with Van Ginkel, but the pass rush, the effort, just kind of being a foundational piece of I think what they're going to be defensively. That's what leaned him into the quality starter bucket for me.
Yeah, which is fair. It's kind of the rewards and concessions of the style of play, and that's a lot of football, right?
Yeah.
A lot of guys are like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Flores style of play structurally, they did a lot with let's be honest, a little last year, and I think the most important thing is we kind of put the bow on Minnesota defensively. They have more to work with this year. And it was already like a respectable unit last year. There were certain games where they kind of ran into a team that's like, okay, we're going to take away the thing that you do well.
Yeah.
And you don't have anything else to fall back on, right? I think they have a little bit more flexibility to fall back on other things this year, and that should help them.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. They got to deal with Detroit, man. Detroit put 30 on them both times.
Yeah.
Last season. So that's going to be an important path for them. And then,
which is a fun storyline because like, that was the 2020 coming out game for Miami, was Tua's first start. The defense with McVay came to town. I was at the game. You remember talking to me on the phone after that game?
Mm-hmm. Defense did some crazy stuff, right? Like,
yeah. They had like the Rams with Jared Goff at quarterback, right? And then Jared Goff, they put 30 on him twice last year going against Flores defense, but they had like 120 yards in the first 50 minutes of the game and then got into some garbage time, but like there was a defensive touchdown that Andrew Van Ginkel ran a touchdown back in that game on a fumble from Emmanuel Ogbah. So a lot of strings that can connect back to that game that we just got done talking about those guys. But I think it's funny that McVay, offensive genius, Jared Goff, and Flores, the first time they ran into him, Flores tore him a new one, right? And you're sitting here now, it's like, yeah, Minnesota, the defensively, they're gonna have to figure out Detroit. Because they put 30 on them both times.
Here's a fun Viking stat. Last year, when the opponent scored 20 or more points, the Vikings were 1-9. When they held the opponent to under 20 points, they were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6-1.
6-1. Yeah. I think it's going to be different this year. Obviously, quarterback is going to be different, obviously. And like, I think you make a good point there that there is more to work with defensively. Particularly, I mean, even at corner, the edge is deeper. Can we survive the interior? I think that's going to be the big thing.
And amid the Kirk injuries last year, they were close, right? They were 6-4.
Yeah.
They lost by 1 point to Denver. In Denver, they lost by 2 points to Chicago, went into the bye week, and they beat the Raiders 3-0. Then they lost in overtime to Cincinnati, and then they lost by 6 points to Detroit. I mean, that stretch of games, they went from 6-4 to 7-8, and they lost 3 games by a combined 6 points.
Yeah, we never it took a while for us to count the Vikings out, especially because we talked about this. You had the 3-6 Packers and Rams make the postseason, right, and the 4-7 Buccaneers. Like they at 7-6 in week 14, and they were in it, man.
Yeah.
They just you just knew at some point that
they went -7 in turnover differential in the final 4 games.
Yeah, they reversed the Vikings there. There
right.
You go. A little taste of your own medicine.
So they'll try to flip the script. They have had a really interesting kind of roster overhaul. Excited to see how it all materializes for them. You can come back tomorrow here on this show for the Chicago Bears. And we'll finish this week by doing a tier maker of the NFC North teams with all the position rooms, and we will rank them as we see them going into the season based off of what we know right now with the information that we have. So that's what you have to look forward to here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here.